right, welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. So we are covering this live hearing that is happening downtown in federal court in Manhattan regarding Sean Diddy Combs. There was a hearing, short hearing between the prosecution, the defense, and the judge regarding evidence, regarding discovery in this case, and it seems it's progressing its way towards a May 5th, 2025 trial date, but I'm not going to talk about it myself. I want to bring on Elizabeth Millner, who is actually in that courthouse for us. Elizabeth, so good to see you. So two things for you. A, if you could briefly describe what the scene looked like, and more specifically, what did you observe of Sean Combs, who was in that courtroom? And B, what happened in court? What were the big takeaways?
Hey, Jesse. Great to see you as always. Today was a little bit different in that I got to the courthouse got inside the courthouse, I should say, about 15 minutes before 1 p.m. That shows you how early I was in there. And I was actually surprised to see less amount of journalists there kind of waiting for this hearing to get started. And so, comparing that to last hearing where it was just a ton of journalists just waiting to get inside that courtroom, this time was completely different in that it was probably about less than 20 journalists altogether. So when we were all kind of ushered up into the 15th floor this time, as opposed to the top floor like the last hearing, it was a lot smaller courtroom, but still the similar makeup of the courtroom. So you have one side where it's going to be Diddy's family members, it's going to be the general public, maybe some extra defense lawyers or those who work for the defense side, at least, kind of sitting over to the left side. And then on the right side where I was sitting, it's going to be all flooded with journalists, as well as some other members of the prosecution team who kind of help with that case as well too. And so we all went up to the courtroom probably around 1:45 today. We're waiting to get this hearing started. It was interesting too because this time around, Diddy was brought in first. He was brought in about a couple minutes after 2 p.m. today, and we were all kind of waiting to see. We had heard mumblings that his mom might be in courtroom, that we were waiting for the children, but then nothing happened. But then, in another twist and turn, the children do walk in, but this time it was a lot smaller bunch than it was the last time. So last time you're having all of Diddy's children, except with the exception of Love, who is just a 2-year-old child, so she wasn't at court, but you had all of Diddy's children there except Love. But this time around, you just had Justin Combs and Christian Combs, meaning that there was no Quincy there today. Delilah and Jesse weren't there. Chance wasn't there, and the caretakers of his younger children who aren't of age just yet, they were not present inside the courtroom as well today. But his mom also wasn't in court today. So when Diddy came inside, it was still that standard issued MDC jumpsuit. He's wearing khaki. From that video of, I think that was obtained by Daily Mail back in September, of Diddy playing hacky sack in Central Park, to now he appeared just astonishingly thinner, which you can expect to be inside a federal detention center for a couple months now. A lot different from the luxury lifestyle that he was living before, but he appeared very noticeably thinner, and maybe being locked up in detention is starting to wear on him. He appeared grayer a little bit as well too, but again, he appeared just like how you would expect Diddy to appear for a hearing. He, when he came inside the courtroom, he hugged his attorneys. He especially hugged Anthony Rico. Then he had hugged Alexandra Shapiro as well too. But then he kept kind of looking at the gallery. Now again, this was at a point where Diddy's sons, Justin and Christian, weren't inside the courtroom just yet, but instead, whenever they came inside the courtroom, and again, this was after Diddy was already sitting down at the defense table, he looked back immediately, he smiled, he beamed up, he waved at at his two sons, and just kind of gave them kind of a little bit of, it's a good to see you type of feeling. That's what I was gathering from inside that courtroom. Now, again, I want to remind our viewers that when we're inside federal court, again, there's no cameras, which, Jesse, I'm sure you have already mentioned that part. But, even for us journalists, with the exception of some who get a special permission of that, we just are relying on a notebook, a notepad, a pen, a pencil, in order to kind of take notes to see what is all going on. I can't even take my Apple Watch inside that courtroom whenever there's a hearing. I have to turn that in. I have to turn my laptop in. Of course, I have to turn my phone in. So we're kind of just eye-watching everything that's going on. Now, when Christian and Justin came inside that courtroom, they were actually sitting just right across from me over on the left side of the gallery. So what I was seeing from both of his sons was a little bit of leg shaking, what I perceived to be a little prayer right before the hearing had actually started as well too. But again, I think their focus was maintaining a good face for their father, being supportive of their father, which you expect at this point because they've attended pretty much all of the hearings so far, with the exception of that emergency hearing that happened, I believe, back in October now. But then they kind of just stood and or not stood, it sat and just kind of listened to what was all kind of happening. Again, that court hearing was pretty quick. It was about 30 minutes long. I think all of us were kind of surprised that the hearing did last that short amount of time as opposed to last hearing, which was about 2 hours or so. But, as our viewers kind of want to get an inside glimpse of what you see at a federal courtroom, you're going to see the defense table and then you're going to see the prosecution table right in front. So it's not like how we see in normal trials where it's like right across from each other. It's like the defense, it is the prosecution, and then of course you're going to have the judge on the bench, and you're going to have the court sketch artist and the person who's kind of transcribing all of what is going on. But that is pretty much the inside glimpse of what I got from inside that courthouse.
And just let's, and appreciate that. That's a really vivid description of what it looks like, because unfortunately we don't have cameras in that courtroom, and there's no cameras expected in that courtroom as this trial progresses, even though there are a lot of people watching this and following it. So just to go back, what were briefly some of the main takeaways about what happened today? What was the discussion about, and where are we left? Where does this case go? What was being decided between the prosecution, the defense, and ultimately the judge?
Yeah, Jesse, was a lot of just discovery material, which isn't the most fun topic to really talk about, if we're being honest here a little bit. So a lot of things was just turning over evidence, what time frame that evidence will be turned in. And so from what, so the government says that they're on track to produce the discovery by the end of the year, meaning December 31st. They say the investigation is still ongoing. They said that they pulled all the text messages from Combs as well as victim one in this case. And then they're kind of proceeding as quickly as possible when it comes to that superseding indictment. So the government was trying to make it clear that, they're still in the process of doing the investigation. It still seems like the superseding indictment is still lingering on in the case. But it was also interesting, too, because we have covered a number of stories about kind of the response from the defense side and kind of talking with the prosecution here. But I noticed whenever I was inside that courtroom that there was a lot of chumminess going on. There was a lot of laughs, a little bit of giggles coming from Mark Agnifilo talking with the prosecutors right before the hearing had started. So they seemed, you wouldn't think that they're in this kind of, fiery battle or anything about the case. They seem pretty chummy. They seem very cordial. And they both sides seem to have respected each other in terms of turning over that evidence, making sure that every deadline is hit, and that type of sort. Now, there was a pending motion that the judge did bring up that, at the time, Judge Submaranian did mention that he wanted to keep, he was possibly thinking about denying that motion, but instead what he did was the defense time, a lot of music kind of going on here in the background. But what the defense says is that their preference was to keep that motion open, so that way, the judge wouldn't dismiss it with a little bit of prejudice, which means that they could have refiled the motion. But, that didn't happen. The defense kind of appeared that they just wanted the motion to stay open, see what would happen with all of that. But, it seems like we will not be seeing any bit of Diddy until March when the next hearing is going. But it seems like they're all kind of going along with the timeline. It seems that they appear to be ready to get started on May 5th, pending whatever goes on with the potential superseding indictment, which again, I just want to stress to our viewers that has not been issued at this time. But it seems as though, they're on track for a May 5th trial date. But again, also, with this time frame given, that's 5 months, meaning 5 more months that Diddy is still behind bars until we kind of see how this entire trial plays out. But for the most part, that's what I gathered from this really quick hearing.
Listen, Elizabeth, that is incredibly helpful, and also it's great that somebody drove by with a great taste in music as well. That's a side note, but I will say now we kind of know where this is going. I am still surprised this is headed towards a May trial date. We shall see what happens. Elizabeth Millner, thank you so much for going down to the courthouse, reporting back to us, and great reporting as always. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break. Again, I want to thank my guests, Elizabeth Vulai and Safa Robinson-Ferrer, for coming on. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. Great insight and breaking down our questions and also the questions from our viewers. Stay with us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get 2 more people on to break down some more things that are happening in this case. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back.